the party. Okay, so welcome to this two-part lecture on auth. So as a disclaimer, auth and security and how to make your website safe and free from attacks is in itself a very, very large topic. So much so that if Flatiron ever wanted to, we could probably open up like a brand new immersive dedicated strictly to security and cybersecurity. Lots of industries have their own department for security and cybersecurity. So the purpose of this lecture and the next is to introduce you guys to just enough auth to get you started and just enough auth such that if you ever choose to deploy your applications, they're relatively safe from all sorts of attacks. So we're not going to be doing a ton of deep dives into any one auth topic. This is just kind of to get you started. Now, I don't think I have absolutely everyone here, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and make this one announcement. If you guys take anything away from this lecture, I would like you to take away that auth is not a part of skateboard.
Auth is not a part of skateboard.
Yes. Auth is not a part of skateboard. It is optional for your Mod 4 project, even optional in your Mod 5.
What?
Yes, it is. It's completely optional. It is not a part of skateboard. Remember that our requirements for your Mod 4 project is you have...
I'm sorry, I have to return this.
I don't need this.
That's all I need.
Oh my god, I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
Not a part of skateboard, huh?
But yeah, a lot of students will have auth in their Mod 5s. We are going to teach you enough auth to get you started. There's also many ways to do auth. So I am going to teach you guys the way that Flatiron has decided is the best way to learn auth in React. So let's take a really quick aside to talk about the two types of auth. There's authentication and authorization. There's a slight distinction between the two. Authorization is proving you are who you are. So if I go onto Twitter and I want to log in as Andrew Wong, I need to first prove I am Andrew Wong by providing a password. If I log in and it's like, oh, you want the right password, you are authorized, or yeah, you are authenticated as Andrew Wong. So authentication is you are who you say you are. Authorization is a little bit different. It deals with permissions. So even though you are who you say you are, so I can authenticate that I am Ann. There's only so many things I can do on Twitter as Ann. So I can post tweets. I cannot post tweets on behalf of, say, Lane. So I cannot go to Lane's profile and post a tweet for him. I am authenticated as Ann, but I'm not authorized to post tweets as anyone other than Ann. We will mostly be diving into authentication today. We'll dive into a little bit of authorization, but hopefully that'll be good because a lot of you guys thought about creating a login form or a sign-up form that deals with authentication. Some of you guys have talked about authorization, which is oh, can I create an admin user that can do this stuff, and regular users can't do that stuff. We'll touch on that a little bit, maybe just enough to get you guys thinking in the right idea or in the right direction. So once you understand what type of authentication and what type of authorization you want in your app, some questions to follow up on is to ask yourself what type of business logic am I going to need to have. So if you're an admin, you can create a page. If you're a user, you can post a comment but maybe not create a page. If you're signed in, you can do all sorts of stuff, but if you're not signed in, you can view a certain page but nothing else. So if you're unauthenticated, maybe there's some things you can still do, but plenty of other things you can't do. So let's talk about how we are going to learn about auth in the next two lectures. And remember, there's a couple ways you can implement auth. The way we are going to teach it for Mod 4 is we are going to use what are known as tokens. So in Mod 2, I think you guys worked with sessions and cookies as a way to basically once a user is authenticated, the cookie is a way of saying that is now the new way to authenticate a user. it kind of replaces the username and password once it's provided the first time. Now, tokens, also known as or JWT or JOT, tokens are what we're going to teach you guys now for auth. So it is like cookies in that once you have a token, from that point forward, it will act as your authentication. Yeah, Lee?
Are you recording?
Yes. I totally am. So tokens are a way to, once you authenticate someone, so once they provide a username and password correctly one time, from that point onwards, you can, instead of asking for a username and password every single time, you can just check their token. So it'd be really, really annoying if every time I wanted to tweet something, users like, can I have your username and password? I just gotta make sure you're in. That's a very valid concern. You wanna make sure that no one else will post on my behalf. But if a user logs in one time, that's all they really should need to do. From that point onward, there's other ways we can say that they're authenticated. The way we're going to teach you guys is using JSON web tokens, also known as JWT tokens or JOT tokens. So how exactly are we going to use tokens to authenticate our users? I'm going to redraw this diagram a little bit because there's things I like about this diagram and there's things I don't like about this diagram. The very first step in this entire process is a user. So let's say I'm the user. That's me. I am at my computer and I want to go to your web app. The first thing that needs to happen is I actually need to make a call to your front-end server. So front-end server. So when I request your web app, what the front-end server is going to essentially do is send back the front-end user experience. So we've talked about how with single-page applications, you are now no longer really making more than one request-response cycle to get the web app. It's a single request, and then from that point forward, your computer now has all the things it needs for the app, at least on the front end. And then there's all sorts of client-side routing. So what happens is the front end will send the entire web app. Usually, the first part of the web app that's seen is something like a login screen. So the username and password, the front end sends this along. So this is the first step. This is the second step. So the entire front end application is sent to the client, which is me. So I now have your web app all loaded in my browser. Now, when I type in my username and password, that is actually then going to make a call to your backend server. So backend server. So we are now basically done communicating with the front-end server. There's only a single request response cycle. When I type in my username and password, that needs to be authenticated somewhere. It's not going to be authenticated on our front end. It is instead going to go to what's known as step 4 here. I'm going to call it step 3 here. This is like user sends credentials. So logging in is going to activate some fetch, probably like a post fetch to the backend server. And so what does the backend server do with these credentials? Well, it compares them to the username and passwords that exist in the database. So step 4 is it will check the credentials. So check credentials. Now, in the database, it'll say, I'm going to look up this username. I'm going to see if the password for this username that the user has sent the server, I'm going to see if it matches what exists in the database. And if it exists in the database, then that means what happens? Well, the next step is that the credentials are validated. This is assuming best case scenario. Credentials are valid. The backend server then says, okay, I checked with the database, the credentials are valid. I am going to create a convenient way for the user not to have to log in over and over again. So inside the backend server, once credentials are validated, there's going to be some logic that creates a token. So inside your backend server is where we create the token. So I'm going to make a little note here. We create a token. And the token is going to act as the authentication for this user moving forward. So a token is created as part of step, I'm going to call this like step 6. So step 6, token is created, and then we send that token back. So we send token to the client. And remember, the client is me at my computer. We need some way to store this token, send this token, and store that token on the client side. You could do it in cookies. The way we're going to choose to teach it to you in Mod 4 is through something called local storage. But conceptually, it's all the same. The backend server, once your credentials are validated, your credentials are valid, creates a token, sends that token to the client, and that point forward, every time the user does something that needs to be authenticated, so if the user is about to post a new tweet, instead of writing the username and password over and over again, you just need to send the token every time. The server will see, does this token look familiar? Yes, this token is familiar. I created this token, so I'm going to let that fetch go through to the database, manipulate the database. So in other words, we're creating a record to create a new tweet, and then we can send back like a 200 okay or like a 202 accepted. So why is something like this even needed? So I'm going to really quickly talk about what we've been doing in your Mod 3, in your Mod 4 labs, and why it might not be the most secure. So the example we've talked about so far is the ability to post a tweet. So post a tweet. So how we would post a tweet is we would typically create a fetch call to some URL, pass it in an options object. That options object will have like method, post, it'll have its headers, which I'm not going to write out. And it has a body, like so. So what type of information might we include with making a post fetch to create a tweet? Well, we might have something like the tweet content. So if I want to tweet like, hey friends, and we probably need some way to associate this tweet with a user ID or the user object. So I might give it like a user ID, and let's say my user ID is 1. So does this look kind of like how you guys made post fetches in Mod 3? You provide some sort of like content and then some sort of association ID, right? Okay, I'm seeing some head nods. So why is this insecure? Because if I have someone malicious, so let's say Lane decides to troll, and he wants to post tweets on my behalf, if he can figure out like the kind of the shape of the body through lots of trial and error, all he really has to do is create a fetch request from a terminal, from a browser, from really any source, and just and start trying out different user IDs. So maybe he's trying to attack my Twitter personally, or maybe he can just see whose Twitter account he controls. So user IDs in Twitter might not necessarily start at like 1, 2, 3, but he can keep trying different user IDs, like 101, like 300, and eventually he's going to get one that's valid. So he's making all these post fetch from the terminal or from a browser, and before Twitter knows it, it now has all these random tweets with all these random user IDs, and now from a user experience perspective, if I log in and I see my list of tweets, I see some content that I don't know that I've created because there were just these random fetch calls with like random user IDs, and some of them went through. So what we are going to attempt to do is, instead of sending in this data called user ID, we can instead send in a token. So I'm just going to say this token is going to be aa.bb.ccc, just some random strings. This token, it could represent a user, but it's a lot more secure now. You can't try out random tokens. It's actually kind of basically impossible. Encryption is in itself very, very complicated, and even if you were to brute force, it would take you like millions of years with like the fastest computers to be able to like find correct tokens. If instead of saying, create this tweet, hey friends, with user ID 101, you're creating this tweet, hey friends, with this encrypted token, the server is going to look at this encrypted token and say, I recognize this token. I have my own secret hidden algorithm for decrypting this data. I recognize that that token belongs to user ID 101, which is Anne. And so we can put in some logic in the backend to say, if I get a token, I will decrypt it, and from that decryption, I can see that this is user ID 101. And now, I will validate that that is a real post. I will create this new tweet, and anyone who tries to create a token or try to like tamper with a token, all of those requests will be thrown out. So at a high level, this is what we're going to attempt to do. We're going to attempt to have all of our fetch from this point onwards be a little bit more secure, especially if it's dealing with a particular user, and other users shouldn't have the ability to like make changes on other users' behalf. Okay, so at a high level, this is the process we're going to do. Before we jump into looking at a little bit of code, I'm going to see if there are any questions. We are going to be diving into a little bit of auth on the backend as well as the front end. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to talk a little bit about bcrypt. So this is in your labs. You guys might have even touched on this in mod 2 or mod 1. I'm not sure because I wasn't your lead at the time. Mod 2? Okay, cool. So really quickly, does anyone want to summarize what the bcrypt gem does?
Encrypts the password.
Encrypts the password. Do you guys know how? Or like what process you need to do to set up bcrypt?
Hash. Install.
Okay, hash installed.
Password digest.
So that's absolutely correct. What we have right now we have a basic Rails application that for the most part only really has a user's model. So what you need to know about our domain for this lecture is our backend has this model of a user. A user has a username, password digest. This is complements of bcrypt. A user has an avatar and a user has a user type. The user type being like a user or an admin. So our users have a password digest. If we take a look at what that means, so schema, username, password digest. If we take a look at our users model, let me put this side by side. Okay, so if you use this special macro we have here called has secure password, like other macros, has secure password is a list of built-in methods and properties we can have access to. So if a user has secure password, let's see what that means. I am going to actually just stop my Rails backend. I'm going to open up my Rails console. And this database has been created, migrated, and seeded. If I do user.all, I can see it's got all these users. If I do user.first, I'm gonna say first is equal to this. So the very first user created was username this Chandler Long. Password digest is this long string. So what happens is when you create a new password, bcrypt will do what's known as hash and salt that password. Hash means it takes that password and puts it through a special algorithm, kind of like a meat grinder. So if you maybe not a meat grinder, maybe that's not the best example. It's unappetizing. But hashing is given some word, there's a special algorithm to change it up. And then what else does bcrypt do? It also salts the password, which means adds a little bit of randomness to it, so that two passwords, even if they are the same plaintext, if you pass it through this bcrypt encryption, they will not create the same password digest. They will create the same hash, so two of the same plaintext passwords will go through a specific algorithm, will come out of the hash the same, but bcrypt will add a little bit of salt, a little bit of randomness to it, such that no two passwords are the same, which means reverse engineering the passwords is basically impossible. So password digest is this long string. The user type is just a regular user created like at whatever. I also have, I'm going to say last user is equal to user.last. So this is a user I just created like 5 minutes ago. Username Hillary. Password digest is this long like string, and then her user type is actually admin. So that's interesting. Hillary has a user type of admin. So before we were talking about all these different users, we were talking about this has secure password macro. Let's take a look at some of the built-in like functionality this macro has. If I attempt to create a new user, I'm going to try to create a new user for myself. So Ann is equal to user.create. I'm going to try to create a username for myself that is just Ann. Okay, try that. It started, and I got this big old nasty rollback. So why is this the case? Errors. Okay, errors. Active model error, blah, 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 message, password can't be blank. So that's one of the built-in features of this has secure password macro. You cannot create a user instance that has a blank password. So let's try this again. I'm going to try to do it. And is user.create with a username and a password of password1. Okay. And now we're at committed. So if I do Ann, which is my user, I can do Ann.password, and this will give me my plain text password. The thing is, as soon as I leave this environment, so if I attempt to exit, I do Rails, C again. I'm going to do Ann is equal to user.last. So this is Ann. Now if I do Ann.password, I actually get nil at this instant of time. So now that I don't have access to the previous local variable I created, that's now like out of scope, like once you created that user, I no longer have access to the plain text password. What I can do is do Ann.password digest. And I get this crazy long hashed and salted string, courtesy of bcrypt. So how do I check to see, given a password, how can I check to authenticate the user? So there is this handy dandy built-in method known as authenticate. Authenticate. So Ann.authenticate. If I pass it in password1, if this instance if I can authenticate it with this password, the return of this command is going to be my user instance. So if this is the right password, what I actually get as my return is the user object. If I type in any incorrect password, so let me try to authenticate Anne with this password PW. My return is actually this Boolean value of false. So .authenticate, something also provided by bcrypt.
And I have a question.
Yes, of course.
So if I put the bcrypt gem in my gem file, when I create my model, I would do like password underscore digest with a string, and that's how I'm connecting it together, right?
That's what you would have in your migration file. And then if you have, to my knowledge at least, if you have this has secure password macro, what this will do is when you're creating a new user, instead of providing a password digest, you would provide just a regular password. Okay, so let's take a look at what other auth is existing in our backend right now. So this is some starter code we have for this lecture. If I go ahead and look at routes. Ooh, my Atom is really, really slow. Okay, I think it's okay now. So right now, our backend server has two routes. There's the /login route and the /profile route. We'll go into the /profile in just a second. Let's take a look at the /login. So the route /login is a post request, and it is going to map to the auth controller to an instance method called create. I'm going to go to my auth controller, if I can find it. API version 1 auth. So right here. How do I get to this method? Well, the documentation, whoever created the starter code, really helped us a lot by adding in proper documentation and comments and books. So you get to this controller, you get to this method by posting to /API/version1/login. What it will do is it will look for the params that exist in the body. And it will say, if the params username, we're going to find that user by the username and save it in this instance variable called @user. Then what we're going to do is, if the user exists and if the user's password is authenticated, so this is that authenticated method we just saw in the console. If this returns a valid truthy value, so it doesn't return false, and if the user exists in the first place, we're going to do this, which is some stuff with sessions. Else, we're gonna do this. So in order to map this to what we know in React, I'm going to change this up a little bit. I'm going to get rid of this. And I'm going to, in either case, render JSON. So just like you saw in Rails API, I'm going to render this object that is message. So if this is the case, if the user exists and the user is authenticated with the right password, I'm going to send back a message, correct user name and password. Else, I'm going to render JSON the message incorrect, are you a hacker? Hacker, are you a hacker? Ah, okay, wow, okay. Hacker. Okay, are you a hacker? We'll do lead speak too. Are you a hacker? Okay, let's give this a try. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's just close this out. I am going to attempt to make a fetch call. So remember that this is a fetch to a specific URL. That URL is this here. So we're going to make a fetch call to HTTPS or HTTP, localhost, blah, blah, blah. It's a post request. So I need to do, I have to type all this out. Method post, headers is going to be equal to an object that is content type application slash JSON accept application slash JSON, and then the body, remember that what I'm expecting, stringify, what I'm expecting in the body is I need to have this username params and this password params. So my username, I'm going to, the one I just created. What username did I give myself? Just Ann? Ann. Capital A. Okay, let's do that. Let's do password, and my password is password1. What was that?
Close quote on post.
Line 2. Oh, thank you. Then response.json. Then I'm just going to console.log the data. So, failed to fetch. Okay. What did I do wrong? So, okay, duh, server's not up and running. Nope. Rails S. Okay, server's up and running now. Let me clear that. Attempt to do it again. Okay, promise pending. 200 complete. Oh, duh. Okay, thank you for that. So console.log. Let me get rid of this. Okay, correct username and password. Let's try this again, and let me mistype my password. Incorrect. Are you a hacker? So what is happening? I make a post request to this endpoint. What is happening on the back end? Well, our route is saying that if I am making a post request to this route, I need to go to this controller and this instance method. What is this controller and instance method doing? It is attempting to find the user by the username that I provided in my request body. That user is then stored in an instance variable. If the database was able to find that user, and if the password provided matches the password digest for this user instance, then I render this message. Else, I render incorrect. Are you a hacker? I could add a couple of other stuff to make this a little bit better. So I could say status is equal to accepted. And then down here, I can say status is equal to unauthorized. So these are just status codes for Rails. If I try this again, I get promise is started a post. Oh, wow, it's taking forever. Okay, syntax error. Unauthorized status. Do I need this? Let's try that. So let me try my Rails server again. Okay, cool. So now I actually get the status code. I attempted to post, and I got as a response 401 unauthorized. Whereas if I provided the correct password, so password1, what I get now is a message which is correct using password. Status accepted is just like 200. So I don't get any errors in my console. So, yes, Andrew.
If you were to do a fetch in the console and pull down like all of the contents of that of the host server, you'd be able to see. Would you be able to see the username?
We are.
Or like what info would you be able to see?
Sure, absolutely. I promise we'll get to that in a moment. I just kind of want to show you guys on the back end how you can authenticate a user, and depending on whether that is a valid authorization or not, you can send back different messages. We have not yet touched on what other things you can send back. Joseph.
Can I see the routes?
Sure.
Quick. Okay, so that API that we're fetching,
We made a post request here.
I don't know why I find out all that you do like a post when you try to fetch a user that's already in the database.
Right, so this is just the convention that this starter code has chosen to do.
Oh.
You could probably set it up to be a different way if you'd like. Mike, you had a question.
Is it a post because you need to like send your username and password, right?
You're sending a username and password. You're also expecting a response back. You could argue one way or another. That gets into debates over RESTful conventions, which is outside the scope of at least this lecture. But how we set up our route is that if you make a post request to this path, you're going to hit this instance method. That's all that is. Let us now, after we've seen how auth works in the backend, let's tie this into our front end. The app we are going to work on today is like a it's the world's simplest like login application. If I go to our front end client, I go to the app.js. The app.js has really a few different things you can do. So if the path is slash, it's going to redirect to /profile. So if I do /nothing, this is going to redirect to /profile. So a redirect is very similar to a link component. A redirect component, you can import it from React. I don't know. You must provide a to property that says what you want to redirect to. So you want to change the URL to what other path. So if the path is /profile, you're going to show the profile component, which this is a little semantic UI card that shows like where the user profile will be. If the path is /login, you'll actually get this login page. And if the route is anything else, because it's a switch statement, so / anything else, you get this 404 page. Page not found. So let us talk about how we can start implementing auth in our application. So because auth is not a part of Skateboard, what I would recommend is to first build out your application statically. So what I mean by that is I can, without communicating to the backend, I can just have a component called class app that extends react.component. React.component should have a render function that returns all this good stuff. So right now, I have no real concept of logging in, as well as no real concept of profile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a static default user. So constructor super this.state is equal to, I'm going to have a state of a current user. So our state is going to be a state. There's just going to be one state in this application. It is the current user, the user that is logged in. So current user, I'm going to statically set it to be a user that models my backend. So let me remind myself what my backend looks like. I am going to need a username and avatar, and it's not clear here, but it's clear in my schema. Yeah, so my user profile should have a username, an avatar, a file, and even like a user type. Maybe we won't display the user type, but I can say create a user with the username. So I can say like the username is like default user. The bio is default bio. And then the avatar is equal to, let's go find like a generic avatar. Avatar. Yeah, it's gonna be. I'm curious to see. Okay, yes, these are fine avatars. I'm going to open. Can I save it? Save and copy image address. Copy image address. Let's try that. Wow. Okay. You know, let's not do that. Let's not do that. Okay. Let's see. Open image, new tabs. This one a little bit shorter. Okay. You know what? I'm just gonna be lazy and copy from my existing database. So we're gonna Rails console, and then user.all. I'm going to copy this URL because I know it's short. I'm going to put it here, exit, then Rails S to start up my server again. So this is my current user. And then what I'm going to attempt to do is pass this to my profile as a prop. So current user is going to be equal to this .state.current user. Now that I'm no longer passing in a component object, I'm passing in JSX. I cannot use this component prop for route. I need to change this to render. And render takes in an anonymous function. This anonymous function is going to return some JSX. So what I should see now is in my application, if I refresh my profile, I should have seen some initial state. Let's see where I went wrong. Inside my app, I have current user is equal to this. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Inside my profile component, I kind of need to change up its props. So in my profile, I have all this stuff. I'm going to destructure out the current user object and then see current user.this, current user.this, current user.bio. So now, if I refresh my application, I have a default user, a default file, and some avatar picture. Great. This is how you build out an application statically. You just have a default user. If we progress past this point in our skateboard, and I say, okay, I'm not going to hard code my current user anymore, I would like, on start of the application, my current user is going to be null. So we should now get some errors with our profile. Yes, we get 3 errors. We get current user.avatar is not correct. I'm going to change this up and do a little bit of conditional rendering. So if current user exists, render all this stuff. Else, let's redirect. Or actually, let's just render null for now to show you guys this change. So now, when I go to /profile, there is no default user, so I have a blank profile. A more professional user experience would be, instead of rendering null for your profile, instead you could import the redirect component from React Router DOM and say, if current user exists, I want to render this card. Else, I want to redirect to /profile or /login. Sorry, /login. Okay. Whoops, I need to close this component. Okay. So now /profile will redirect to login. If I try to go to my profile, I'm always going to get redirected back to this login because you can't see a profile if there's no current user. So how do we enable our login functionality? Well, right now, if I click in login, nothing's happening. Let's attempt to figure out in our front-end code how this works. So in my app.js, I don't have any type of callback function. I do know that in my login form component, that's one of the things that gets rendered. So login form is a React component that manages state. It's a control form. It has a handle change that looks like this handles if the form changes, it updates the state. Don't worry about this code, it's just there to make things work. And then there's this handle, log, and submit that does absolutely nothing. I am going to just do a console.log, like attempting to log in, just to see if this works. So now if I refresh, attempting to log in. So on login, what should I do? Well, I should attempt to take the credentials in my form. I should attempt to send it to the backend, validate if those credentials are correct in the database, and then send back some response. So we have already built out this functionality with that route that is /version1/login. So I'm going to make a fetch call to that exact route. So I'm going to make a fetch call to localhost 3000/API/version1/login. I'm going to make this request here. It is going to be a post request with headers, content type application/JSON. Copy and paste this, accept, and then the body is going to be json.stringify, where the username is going to be equal to this.state.username. So remember, we have a controlled form. We can take advantage of that by referring to the state to see what is in the form. The password is going to be this.state.password. And what do I want to do? Well, I want to take that response. I want to parse it into a JSON and then do another dot then. So with the data, let's just console.log the data. Ooh, okay, that was a lot. But handle log and submit is a callback that gets activated when this form is submitted. So in my app, I can attempt to do, I try to log in as Hillary a lot, as you can see. Password 1. What do we get? Message, correct username and password. If I type in some sort of gibberish, I get 401 unauthorized. So we could improve our functionality a little bit. I'm going to say in my backend, in my auth controller, I'm going to render this JSON object if we are authorized. If not, I'm going to render this JSON object. I'm going to add in some extra features. So I'm going to say if we are authenticated, error is false. So there is no error. If it's not authenticated, I'm going to say error is true. So now the JSON response we're getting is a little bit different. If I attempt to log in, it's just taking a while. Maybe if I refresh this page. Okay, let me log in with password 3. Okay, incorrect password. I get the response message I get back. This data has this property, error is true. So I could improve my functionality ever so slightly on my user side, my user experience, by saying in the login form, if data.error. So if data.error is true, I could then say alert, incorrect, correct username or password. And then else, we want to set the current user. Okay. For the time being, let's just else. We'll get to that in just a second. I want to set the current user to the user that is logged in. For now, I'm just going to console.log successfully logged in. Okay, so let me try refreshing my application to see if I can hit both possibilities. So if I log in with some gibberish password, log in, I get incorrect username or password. So my user experience is now slightly improved. If I attempt to give it the correct password, I'm successfully logged in. The problem, though, is the data that we get sent back. If I actually attempt to just console log data, it's not really useful because all it is this JSON object that is a mirror, that is a message that says correct username and password, and an error that says false. What would be nice is if the user is authenticated, the server will return to me some information about that user. This is actually a really, really easy change. We can just say user information is equal to @user, which is the instance object that we pull out of the database. In my login form, I'm just going to console log data. So now if I type in and password 1, internal server error. I forgot a comma somewhere, didn't I? There you are, you little sucker. Okay, you know you're a developer when you start talking to your computer. Okay. Okay, so what does my response look like now? It's got this message, correct username and password, error is false, and there's this attribute, user information, that is this JavaScript object. Avatar bio created at ID, password digest, blah, 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 all this really good stuff. So I know that data.userinfo is information about my user, and in the state of my React application, I can set the current user to be this data I get back from my server. So we're going to do that. We're going to create a callback function in this scope. So set current user is going to be a callback function that takes in a user object and says this dot set state of the current user is going to be my user object. Simple enough, pretty straightforward callback function. Let's pass this through as props. So when we log in, we would like a way to pass a reference to this prop. So I'm going to say set current user is equal to this dot set current user. Because I am passing in some JSX, I need to change this to be a render function. I'm going to make both of these multi-line to make it slightly easier to read. And then make this multi-line, make this slightly easier to read. Okay. And so now, inside my login form, I would like to call this dot props dot set current user, pass in the user object, which is data.userinfo. If I've done this correctly, my React will say on load of the application, my app has a state that is current user null. I'm going to attempt to log in as Anne, give it the correct password. On login, my state is now no avatar bio created at password digest updated at user type username Anne. So what can I do with this? Well, after a nice successful login, it'd be great to, or even after a login. So after successful login, my state in my current user is updated. I can say in my app, my user is, if my user is null, what I want to see on /login is the login form. We can add in a little bit more extra logic that says, if the state current user, if the state is null, then render this login component. Else, redirect to /profile. So, oops, I messed up all sorts of stuff. A question mark. Oh, okay, you're right. I forgot my question mark. Thank you, Nathan. Okay, still broke. Let me read my error. Unexpected token, expected this. So, I think I cut this off too early. Okay, this render, and then this goes here. Okay, I think that should do it. Okay, so what does my app say? Current user null. If I do and password 1, I see my profile. I don't have a profile image, which is really, really boring. Let me see if I can go back to log in. And let me see if Hillary has a profile. Hillary, I gave her the same password. Hillary, my bad. Okay, Hillary, incorrect. Oh, I could have sworn I gave her password 1. No? Okay. PW? Okay, that's super lame. Okay. What if I, in the few minutes we have left before we'll break, what if I do Rails C? And try user.create. Let me try to create like a username, like username lane, password, password 1. Okay, committed. Let me exit Rails server. Let me see if you should have, the C database should have created like default profiles. Lane, password 1. Huh, no avatar. I don't know why. That's all right. We know with Hillary, maybe we'll just use Hillary's example from now on. Hillary has, oh wait, no, I can't use Hillary because I don't know her password.
Should we call her?
Dang it, what did I set her password to?
What about just password instead of password?
Let's see. Okay, well,
Are you a hacker?
are you a hacker?
I'm a hacker.
Okay. We were able to get to a point. I'll figure this out during the break. But
Is she lowercase Hillary?
is she lowercase Hillary? That's a good question. Hillary.
I am a hacker.
What happened to all the profile pictures? All right, that's okay. The main issue we're running into now is we are able to get the logic pretty much working. So if the path is nothing, redirect to profile. But how profile works is we send in a status of a current user. If there is no current user, what we actually do is we redirect to login. And then inside login, if there's no current user, we show the login form. But if there is a current user, we just redirect to profile. And why do we do this? Well, because that's kind of how most applications actually work nowadays. So if I go to like github.com, if I go to github.com, I'm currently logged in. If I sign out, what I can now do is I can visit github.com/login. So this will show me a login page. As soon as I actually log in, so flatirondschool.com, signing in. The second I actually log in, it redirects me to the home page or like my profile page. Now, as a person who's logged in, I actually cannot access this login route anymore. It'll just automatically redirect me to this view. So that's actually what we're attempting to do here. You can see that it actually redirects me just to /nothing, even though I typed in /login. So that's kind of the behavior I was mimicking here. So as soon as we log in, it automatically redirects to the profile. If we're not logged in, if I try to go to the profile, it'll just automatically redirect me to the login page. The problem we have now is that on a hard reload of this application, state gets wiped out, so there is no current user, even though I just typed in my password or Hillary just typed in her password. We instead need a way to long-term authenticate our user. And we are going to use that with tokens. So every time a user first submits this form, the backend authenticates the user and creates a token. We send that token to the client side, such that if they do a hard refresh on the page, it shouldn't affect their user experience and kick them out. It should instead keep them logged in. So that's going to be the goal of this afternoon's lecture. For now, we're going to break.
How long?